Yesterday for this segment of the show, we spent approximately 4.5 hours responding to a couple of obscure libertarian YouTubers. May have seemed like overkill, but then again, if you listen frequently, you know that I could easily do an entire show on one TikTok video that annoyed me, so it's all par for the course. Today for our daily cancellation, we're going somewhere slightly less obscure, but still libertarian. I hadn't planned to dump on the libertarians so much this week, but that's the way it's working out. And I think I find libertarians so especially annoying because we have a few significant things in common, and yet ultimately they're still so wrong when it comes down to it. And that's where the frustration comes from for me. The libertarians are singing my tune when they talk about abolishing the income tax or massively decreasing the size of the federal government. They tend to be skeptical of the government education system, which is good, and protective of gun rights. They are generally pretty consistent constitutionalists. All of these things are good. They may take it a bit too far sometimes. Like, not all taxation is theft, for example, just most of it is. But still, we line up pretty closely on those issues. Things fall apart when we move from economic and strictly constitutional issues over to cultural and moral concerns. Here, libertarianism begins to quickly break apart, and the libertarian is left out in the cold, in the dark, confused, not sure which way to go. His ideology is not robust enough to account for the full scope of the human experience. He was mostly right about those economic and constitutional issues, but he was right for, if not the wrong reasons, then at least incomplete reasons. He wants to pay fewer taxes and keep his guns and so on because of liberty, and by liberty he simply means his own personal ability to do whatever he wants because he wants to do it. There are fuller and sturdier reasons to be in favor of gun rights and against overtaxation, but those generally are not his reasons. And so when he encounters the deeper issues, the moral issues, he has only his kind of libertine, do what you want mentality to fall back on. This is when he starts shouting slogans like, let people enjoy things, and the government shouldn't legislate morality. Except that literally all legislation legislates morality. All laws, by definition, are rooted in a moral code. They may be wrongly rooted or rooted in the wrong moral code, but completely amoral laws would be laws passed without concern at all for whether they're actually right or wrong. Legislation that doesn't attempt to legislate morality would be, by definition, arbitrary. The libertarian doesn't seem to fully understand this fact. And as for letting people enjoy things, the fact is that enjoyment is not, in and of itself, enough to justify any act. If we're determining whether an act should be legal, or even simply whether it's good, aside from the legal question, we need to ask more than just, do people enjoy it? And when it comes to that enjoyment, we also need to reflect on the nature of the act and consider the sort of pleasure that's being derived from it. Take almost any self-destructive and harmful act, and you'll find people who enjoy it. That is, they take pleasure, however twisted, from it. Should we simply leave people to their self-destructive pleasures, even if the pursuit of that pleasure is actually making them miserable and causing despair in the long run? These are all questions that libertarianism cannot answer and refuses to even consider. And that long preamble brings us to an article in the Libertarian Reason magazine written by writer Elizabeth Nolan Brown titled, "The New Campaign for a Sex-Free Internet." It's a lengthy article that can't be fully analyzed in this segment, but the basic gist is that Brown is upset about the fact that due to rule changes over at sites like Pornhub, fewer amateur wannabe porn stars are able to whore themselves and their bodies out for a quick buck. Brown is deeply concerned that there is now a tragic scarcity of whoring on the internet. So reading now, it says, for more than a decade, both amateurs and professionals shared their sometimes sweet, sometimes weird, and often graphic sexual activity on Pornhub. Launched in 2007, not long after YouTube, and with a similar free-for-all spirit, the site represented a new wave of adult entertainment in which anyone with an internet connection could partake and anyone with a digital camera could become a star. Now, a quick sidebar here. We have already started on a precarious note with the writer's claim that the graphic sexual content on Pornhub is sometimes sweet. I would have thought that sweet would be something like, I don't know, bringing flowers home for your wife just because. I wouldn't think of it as like humping somebody on camera and posting it to the internet for profit. Maybe I just have an old-fashioned sense of romance. Probably so. Continuing, dubbed tube sites, Pornhub and its various peers began to dominate web traffic generally and porn consumption specifically. These sites trod on porn's established business model, but for savvy sex workers, the tube site network could provide a way to break into the business or reach audiences directly without the porn industry's usual middlemen. To monetize one's presence in the early days took some creativity, but tube sites would eventually offer content partnerships that allowed people to get paid directly for their videos. Their competitors, such as cam sites and clip stores, made the process of charging money and getting paid even smoother. Oh yes, just kind of reflecting nostalgically on the good old days. Brown here speaks wistfully and longingly about the time when many thousands or even millions of people who would have otherwise been shut out of the porn industry were able to break into it with the help of the internet, monetizing their sexual activity and auctioning their bodies off to the highest bidder or the lowest bidder or just any bidder at all. In previous generations, some of those people unable to become porn stars may have ended up getting an education instead, or training somewhere, taking up a trade, becoming entrepreneurs, entering some other more productive profession. But Pornhub saved them from that dark path. And that was very good, Brown says, because, quote, for the first time, people with a truly diverse array of body types, looks, races, ethnicities, sexualities, gender identities, and kinks had direct access to the tools of porn production and distribution. In the past, porn had catered to a much more narrow range of tastes with predictable results. Now, audiences could access all sorts of content that defied conventional notions of who and what was deserving of lust. On sites like Pornhub and the microblogging platform Tumblr, outside the mainstream content thrived. Now, we'll return to that passage in just a moment, but first let's continue on a little farther as we get to the tragic moment where everything fell apart. And this is the moment that Brown so deeply laments. It says, quote, and then one day, it was gone. In December 2020, without warning, Pornhub removed all videos posted by unverified users, a massive cache of content encompassing anything not posted by formal content partners or members of the platform's official model program. More than 10 million videos were suspended, and unverified users were banned from uploading or downloading new videos. It was more than a disruption to the site. I almost feel like we need sad piano music in the background here. The unannounced disappearing of so many videos was a huge cultural loss, says Ashley, a transgender sex worker and civil rights activist with a robust presence on social media and in offline organizing. The Pornhub purge came about 2 years after Tumblr's ban on any content depicting sex acts and preceded a similar announcement in summer 2021 from OnlyFans. Then in September 2021, the first user-uploaded porn site XTube, founded in 2006 and now owned by the same parent company, shut down entirely. Tragedy. Now, there are still billions of smut videos online, but it's literally billions of them. But it's a huge cultural loss that we're missing a few of them now, she says. She mourns over the fact that prior to all of these amateur cyber prostitutes being kicked out of the club, porn was on its way to being truly equitable with a diverse array of body types, looks, races, ethnicities, sexualities, et cetera, all represented by porn. Now, what's of course lost in this is any sense of what is actually good. The writer, being a dedicated libertarian, doesn't concern herself with such questions. Instead, she simply declares that if people are doing a certain thing, and if they seem to be deriving any pleasure from it, then it's best if everyone is able to do it equally and equitably. The fact that whoring yourself on the internet brings despair and hopelessness and leads so often to substance abuse and suicide is irrelevant to her. If a group of people are marching off of a cliff and they seem to have smiles on their faces while they're doing it, she just wants to make sure that the group is demographically representative of the overall population. Again, the concept of the good, what is good, is lost. And that is always lost by libertarians and generally by the culture. And of course, one of their rejoinders here, one of their responses is, well, who defines good? What is good? How can you define that? Yeah, we do have to talk about what the good means. But are you saying that a word like liberty or freedom or human rights, is that any clearer to you than good? You run into the same problem. How do you define that? It's not like there's some sort of unanimous agreement on what any of those words mean. In fact, the fact that we cannot agree on what those words means is like tearing our culture apart right now. And so instead, they just, rather than talking about what good means and concerning themselves with it, they just discard it entirely. Let's not even worry about what's actually good. And that brings us to the most revealing phrase of all that we get in that article, which is deserving of lust. Deserving of lust. Now, I can see why people would want to be deserving of love. Love is fulfilling, it's edifying. There is joy in love. In fact, there isn't joy anywhere but in love. There's no joy outside of love. But lust, by itself, is the reduction of a person to the level of an object. That's what lust is, especially the lust that you find with pornography on the internet. The person who's doing the lusting, they don't recognize the image on the screen. They don't see that person as a person. It's just an object that is there to gratify them. That is lust down to its basest level. It's objectification, treating a person like an object. If you're an object of lust apart from love, then you're being coveted the way that a person might covet a consumer good, like a car or a new pair of shoes. Should this actually be anyone's goal? The fact that certain people are being deprived of the opportunity to be objectified by strangers on the internet, to be treated like an object, absent of their personhood, is this something that we should be striving for? Is it a tragedy that people are being deprived of it? Do we have a right to it? Well, this is the kind of nonsense that libertarianism so often descends into. And that is ultimately why the writer of this article, whose name I've already forgotten, last name Brown, is today canceled. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends.